Hello, 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 everybody. It's really good to see you all here. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special event. My name is Mike Supervici. I'm the head of acceleration here at Desol Group. If this is your first time joining us on an event like this, let me give you a little bit of an introduction to Desol Group, the event format, and then I'm going to go into a presentation on the topic of the day, which is on sort of joining a venture team. So thank you so much for the applause. I really appreciate it. In case this is your first time on AirMeet, there's actually a little emoji button at the top in the bottom right. This is how these sort of like applauses are kind of coming up on your, or whatever emojis are coming up on your screen. A little bit of a background on Desol Group. Desol Group is a company whose entire purpose of existence is to help emerging VC firms thrive. Okay, so we do that in a number of different ways. We have a training component to our business. We train emerging managers on how to launch enduring venture capital firms. We train limited partners on how to invest in emerging managers. And we train associates and venture partners and folks who want to be working in the ecosystem on sort of how to work with emerging managers. And this session is actually going to primarily focus on that, which is basically on how to sort of join a venture team. We have also developed what's effectively become the operating system for venture capital. It's called Desol Hub. Desol Hub is a platform that allows these emerging managers to really run very tight operations so that they don't have to put together 7 to 10 different tools with like a Zapier integration, which is just kind of crazy if you sort of just think about it. So it handles everything for your VC operations, from fundraising to deal flow to data rooms, just literally everything that you need kind of at your fingertips. And it's become sort of the way that most new and emerging managers are kind of operating their funds. We have also a services component called Desol Partners, which handles all the legal ops, the fund admin, and everything else. And it's all sort of like built in within to the platform. And the final component of our business is capital. So we have a fund of funds as well as a marketplace where we sort of try to drive capital into these emerging managers. So if you take a step back at what we do, we're literally trying to like reduce all of the sort of friction for these sort of emerging VC firms to thrive, and we do it sort of systematically through tools, services, and capital as well. A little bit of background on me, in case you don't know me. I'm a co-founder of this company. We have helped over 500 VC firms launch to date. We've done this all over the world. And so I've seen a lot of things that work, a lot of things that don't work. And after I'm done with my presentation today, I'm more than happy to sort of answer some more questions and things like that. Okay. With regards to the format of today, I'm going to spend maybe 10-20 minutes going over just some best practices of how to think about like joining a venture team. What are some of the things you can do? How do you break into this industry that's been, in my opinion, too exclusive to date, which is why we're trying to sort of break down the barriers to entry right now. And you know, once we're done with that, I'll take a few questions from into the Q&A. There's like a little actual like Q&A button on the right hand side, and then I'm going to come off the screen, and then you'll see a set of tables. Okay, these are like networking tables where you can kind of meet each other and talk to each other and stuff like that. And these are designed to be highly interactive. Just wanted to make sure that you sort of know kind of what's going on there. I'm also going to make some announcements as well on a couple of events that we have coming up here, and we'll also put those into the chat. Okay. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my presentation here, and we can go ahead and get started. Awesome, everybody. So as you know, we're probably on this call because venture historically has been pretty like exclusive. We think that's not great, but I'm going to try to give you some thoughts about how to kind of break in and fix this. Okay. Um, so um, and all of this stuff comes just from our experience. Okay, so like I said, we've launched lots of firms. We place lots of associates and venture partners into these funds. So just know that this is all sort of coming from experience. Okay. So first strategy, and then we're going to talk about each of these points. So first, you really need to learn to be effective in this. So you need to have a good understanding of how the business works and all that other stuff. Then you want to sort of like kind of leverage the conditions that are happening, and I'm going to talk about some best practices to sort of do that. But in short, like, there are various types of companies and businesses and funds and things like that that are needing help. So you want to sort of work through the conditions on the field. Uh, Obviously, I'm really biased about this because our entire business is to help emerging managers thrive. But that's also where all the opportunity is, like they're smaller, they grow faster, it's much harder to sort of break into like an established firm. So this also, obviously, I want to preface that and say I'm biased about this, but I also think it's probably the best way for you to kind of get your foot in the door. Um, and then once you get your foot in the door, you got to add an enormous amount of value and you have to over deliver. So I'm going to give you like thoughts and on how to do that in the next upcoming slides. All right. So let's go ahead and start talking about like learning, okay? Like no firm wants to necessarily teach you like the basics, nor do they have time. And these the managing partners of these firms are pretty busy with fundraising and investing, so they don't really have the time to do that. So you want to try to basically like be like a sponge. You want to like learn as much stuff as you possibly can. I encourage you to train in like programs like our Venture Institute program, which literally specializes in doing this, but there's others as well that are pretty good. So this is not just about us. If I were you, I would sort of be like a sponge, going to taking advantage of as many of these opportunities to learn. Many of these are free. Some of them are paid, but some of them are worth it, and that's okay too. So it sort of depends on your budget. But I really think you want to try to get as much information as possible. You also want to build expertise. All right. A lot of the information that you read online is just wrong. And that's because adventure historically has been kind of a cottage industry that's been, it's just been really hard. It's been really hard to get good information. So we've developed a product and a tool called Decile Base, and we can put this in the chat for everybody, but it's, Decile Hub slash base. Okay. And this is an AI that we've trained only on our information. So between myself and our team, we've answered thousands of questions, literally thousands of questions about venture capital from our community, which is vast at this point. And so, that's where we've trained the LLM on it. And we don't allow it to go out to the internet. Okay, because again, a lot of this information is not right for lots of reasons. So if you were to ask it some random questions, you wouldn't be able to. It would just tell you like, I don't know how to answer this, right? And so asking questions into like a decile base is another way for you to get ahead of it. In some cases, if you sort of use base, you can begin to add value to lots of people in this industry just because of the stuff you've known with base, right? So we just put it in the chat, everybody. This is kind of like your co-pilot. And I would encourage you, everybody here, to sort of like bookmark that link, because that's going to be sort of the fastest way for you to get any sort of question answered about base. And what's cool about it is that if for whatever reason, like the AI can't answer your question, you can also just post it to the community. Um, and then the other thing I would say is like, I'd like you to start thinking about learning how to manage venture systems. Um, you know, again, we think Decile Hub is the way to go, but it doesn't have to be just about Decile Hub. Try to learn systems about like tools and things like that, because by doing so, you can become an incredible value add in the future in any sort of role that you might have. And we're going to cover that later. But if I were you, I would start like playing around with something. Like, oh, can I get a beta of this, or can I jump into this little system that you're using, blah blah blah, for deal flow and things like that. Okay, so some ideas there. All right. The cool thing that's happening right now is that there's an incredible renaissance in venture capital. We're seeing record number of fund launches. Again, that's why a lot of stuff in the media is wrong. We're actually seeing the exact opposite in many cases. So there's just like a lot of opportunities. A lot of venture firms are looking for various forms of apprenticeship, and I'll cover that in a second. There's companies like us, for example, that are growing very fast. I mean, if you just go to Go VC Lab and you look at jobs, I don't know, we have like 10 jobs openings right now, right? And you kind of want to be if you can't get a job or an apprenticeship or something in a venture firm, work at like one of these sort of like essential, like foundational companies like Desol Group that can give you access to lots of managers, learn operations and things like that, so that you can sort of have that on your resume, which then opens up even more opportunities for you later if you want to sort of work in a venture funds. And then the final thing I'm going to say about this, and before I go down this tangent, which I'm going to spend a little bit of time on, um, look, you got to figure out a way to sort of like clear the way on like the most difficult things that venture capital firms have to deal with. All of us, kind of want to get into this because of the cool stuff. Like, I want to like look at a bunch of deals and review a bunch of deals and, make investments and stuff like that, you know. But the way you're going to break in is by not doing that. Okay. The way you're going to break in is by doing all the other stuff, like the dirty work, basically, right? So what's the hardest thing for these managers is raising money, right? Finding LPs and things like that. So helping managers with fundraising, a lot of people are gonna want to work with you if you can like help them somehow, right? And it doesn't mean you have to make introductions, but at least like try to clear the way, right? Another thing that you can do is you can run a lot of these like ops stuff so that they can focus on like doing what they do, right? So that's another example of how you can sort of break in. And once you're in, then you can get more and more like exposure and leverage and help with regards to the other stuff. But I can tell you, like, if you just want to sort of come in and like kind of climb the corporate ladder by starting off as an analyst that looks at a deal at deals and stuff, I mean, there's not a very good succession plan right now in venture capital, especially with these big firms that could potentially afford to bring someone in at that level. And you're going to just grow a lot slower if you ever grow at all. And so the better thing that you can do is to try to get good at like the other stuff and gradually get more and more exposure to like the deal flow side as you sort of earn that trust, right? So uh, you know, if anybody here, if you can help any emerging managers with fundraising, they will like forever help you, help be indebted. They will eventually compensate you well and stuff like that if you end up working with them. And it's just a really good way to build a reputation. Okay. So, lots of managers are out there right now raising capital, right? These are the conditions. You can help. You can obviously provide a lot of value. Okay. Um, I talked about this about emerging firms. And again, look, this is where all the future is being built right now. Okay. Um, Emerging VC right now is kind of like, I don't know, like basically where maybe like crypto was 10 years ago. There's an almost like an entire, it's not almost, it's like an entirely new asset class that's being built. So you have like old school traditional venture that invest a lot of money in a lot of bigger deals. And then there's this whole new crop of like emerging managers. Like I said, just in for us in the last 2 years, like 500 firms we've launched all over the world, right? And they're investing at pre-seed and seed primarily, so very like at the inception stages of many of these businesses. And they're the ones that are effectively funding the future, and that's where a lot of the alpha is. So in other words, where a lot of the like returns are, because they're able to get in at a lot lower valuations. Their funds are smaller and things like that, so their multiples can be much higher. And a lot of the folks that are starting these kinds of firms are very similar to the kind of people that they're backing, right? So instead of being founders of startups, they're founders of venture capital firms, and they're sort of all in. And they're all of the incentives are built so that they can sort of be super successful at their craft, which is to become an enduring venture capital firm. And therefore that's where all the growth is too, because they're like hungrier, they hustle more, they have more opportunity for growth. They're going to raise funds at a much faster rate, and you can grow with them. This is key, right? And so if you can just get in now with an emerging manager that's solid, you can grow with them over a long time, and then your career is going to grow much faster. So if you were to join like an emerging firm right now as like an analyst or something, or even an associate or something like that, the track to becoming a partner, for example, if you're good, is way faster. Whereas there is no track for you to become a partner in many of the bigger firms. Almost like it's virtually impossible just because of like the systems and the structures. Okay, and because these are like almost, think of them kind of like startups, right? So constantly like under resourced, right? Just like any other business, many of you have been in startups before. And so you also have an opportunity to have tremendous impact, right? Because if you can sort of offload a lot of like the operations and things like that off of the partners by setting up systems, dealing with stuff, you sort of become incredibly valuable to like the whole entire organization, uh, to the point where you eventually will become invaluable, right? And therefore, you'll be able to sort of grow significantly faster, right? And so, enormous amount of leverage, right, that you can have if you kind of join the right fund at the right time, by providing a lot of value. Okay. Speaking of adding value, let's go into this a little bit more details. Okay. How can you add value? So, for example, you know, right now, most general partners and managing partners in these VC firms want to spend like nearly 90% of the time doing two things: fundraising and investing in deals. And there's just not a lot of time for other stuff. But, managing a network that big is a lot of work. Okay. Just for those of you who are sort of new to this, in a typical fundraising process for a VC firm, the managing partner will pitch 300 to 500 people. Okay, it's a lot of people, and none of these are cold, so it's not like they're like spamming and getting emails. You have to get like introductions, so you need connectors to a lot of those people. You have to host lots of events. Okay, and so just that itself is a huge task to manage that side of the network. Okay, on the other side of the network, okay, the average good emerging manager firm sees about 1,000 companies a year that are on thesis. Okay, and these theses are pretty tight. They're like, I'm investing in quantum computing. It's like, okay, you got to see 1,000 companies in quantum computing, and they got to screen them down to like five, right? And so it's a lot of work. So the idea that you're going to do this in like a spreadsheet is not going to work, right? So you're gonna have to create systems and processes, right, to be able to sort of like run these efficiently so that you can get the best outcomes. And this is an area where someone can help, right? So this is an area where if you become good at this kind of stuff, you can really help the partner do a lot of good stuff, and you can also learn a lot in the process. Okay, so that's an example of that. Supporting like the fundraising process. Most of fundraising happens through events right now, right? And so like helping with events, hosting events, getting people to events, that kind of stuff, right? That's a lot of work, right? Just setting up an event is quite a lot of coordination, right? And so you can help by doing stuff like that and making them really work. And then of course there's no there's no substitute for hustle, right? And so what are some things that you can do to grow the network? So maybe you can help break into like your some of your network. Maybe you're like an alumni of some sort of like university or something, and maybe there's an opportunity to co-host an event with your university where there's going to be potential LPs there, right? Those are things that you can sort of do to sort of like add enormous amount of value. And I can't stress enough just how valuable some of these things could be. This is like the difference between like, in some cases, a fund that maybe does a 2x and possibly a 10x and sometimes 50x, just because of sort of like the network growth. If I can just zoom out and take a step back a little bit before I go any further on this, venture capital is a network business. Okay. And, you need an enormous network to be able to invest in good companies. You need an enormous network to be able to fundraise, right? And so you're effectively managing this network, and it has to be managed super well and super professionally because um, there's just a lot of bad behavior that's happened in venture capital historically, and you need to sort of run this at completely much better, more ethical way, right? And so your opportunity lies there. Can you activate this network to get the results that you need? And if you're good at that, you're going to become incredibly invaluable, and a lot of people will want to give you a chance to help them, because they're all overloaded. Okay. Um, the other thing that we see, and this is again, all these are sort of like lessons from the trenches. So for those of you that don't know, taking a quick step back, we run a program called Venture Institute. We run it about 2 to 3 times a year, and we train hundreds of people to join venture capital firms. And then the top performers in those cohorts get matched with firms that we have launched, and they get to sort of apprentice for 8 weeks. And if they if the firm likes kind of like the match there, they end up hiring. Okay, and it's working really good. And the reason that I'm bringing this up here is because sometimes we go through all this process, right? Get people in, get you access to the top firms that have been super pre-vetted through our accelerator, all this stuff to make sure that you're in a good firm, ethical firm. And then we get to this kind of point here, like around over delivering, and it's like I see people be like, "Meh, I'm kind of doing this thing on the side." They're not like really hustling, right? And I mean, this is a outlier business. Okay, it's like, you know you're going to make, if you're an investor, you're going to make 25 investments and only 2 of them are going to return your fund. The other, like, 15 are going to go to zero, right? It's like a classic Pareto distribution. And then there's a classic Pareto distribution between the firms that are super successful and the ones that are okay. And there's even more of a Pareto distribution between the firms that can launch and then the firms that don't launch. Okay, so just to kind of give you another way to kind of look at this, we run the VC Lab Accelerator where we launch venture capital firms 4 times a year. And every time we run a cohort, we get roughly 3,600, 3,700 plus applications, okay? Or people starting applications, okay? It's a lot of people. And we down select down to like, 300, and we end up like launching 50 funds, okay? Right? And just seeing that sort of, and that's 4 times a year, right? And so like there's an enormous amount of Pareto distribution. So when you get a shot at like being part of something like this, you kind of need to like be like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to go above and beyond and really do incredibly excellent work. Because if the firm and you don't do excellent work, you're not going to get sort of the returns. The other thing that we sort of see when we sort of match people, we see people like being kind of transaction. Well, I'm not really getting paid for this, so I'm not going to do this. I need to see that there's like this direct relationship between like how I get paid and getting the result. I'm telling you, if you go in with that attitude, you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail. You're not gonna break in. No one's gonna want to work with you, really, right? Um, even the managers themselves, they're effectively paying it forward themselves because they're actually not making that much money on management fees, because their funds are small. Eventually they're going to become very large and they'll have quite a lot of fees, but not right now, right? And so they also are kind of taking this sort of approach. They're like, I'm not going to be transactional. I'm all about like getting returns, and if we get a lot of good returns, I'm going to make a lot of money. Everybody will too, right? And so while you're in this period where you're sort of earning it, you kind of have to go in with this sort of like pay it forward attitude. You can't be like, oh, I will only do this if you pay me like this, or if you get this much carry or whatever. If you do that, you'll fail. And this is the same thing for venture partners too. We see this a lot. We see a lot of venture partners being fired a lot of times, and the reason the venture partners get fired is because of this issue as well, because they didn't over deliver, and then they're expecting to get paid. It's like it's not great. Okay, so you got to kind of shift your mindset to sort of break in. Okay. I talked about this already, which is the Venture Institute. Go to Go VC Lab. This is sort of our training program where we sort of help we help you get to market and stuff, get into these funds, whether it's as a venture partner or an associate or something. But even if you don't work with us on any of our stuff, no problem. I still think that these lessons could help a lot. right? Like if you just go and meet a manager or something like this, and you start to kind of like embody some of these principles that we talked about, yeah, they're going to have no choice but to try to help to, work with you, right? And so go in with the right attitude. I'm going to stop sharing here and take a few more questions. Before I do, just so you know, we're on speaking of this Venture Institute, we're going to be hosting an AMA. I think it's on the December 18th, so we'll go ahead and post that in the chat as well, so we can talk more about the program. But I kind of want to stay a little bit more high level and kind of answer any sort of your questions here for the next, let's call it like maybe 10 minutes before we go into networking. So on the right hand side, you'll see that there's like a set of boxes. There's like the sort of chat that many of you are in, and then there's like a Q&A. If you can add your questions into like the Q&A, I would really appreciate it, because then that helps us sort of prioritize, the questions that you have, versus sort of looking at the chat. So go ahead and put them in there. I'm going to go ahead and answer questions here for like the next 10 minutes, and then we'll get off the screen and give you go into networking so that we can all meet. Uh, Jennifer's asking a question. What do you think will be the impact of vertical AI agents at entry and mid-level positions, and what would be the most effective approach to either leverage the technology or upskill talent in response to these changes? I can't. I don't. I mean, it's a broad question. I can tell you just within our industry, okay, because this is what the topic's about. Um, you know, eh, we are. I mean, Desktop base basically is effectively support AI agent to start, and then you can make a case that uh, that can go into a variety of other types of businesses. So I think it's really important. I think that what you can do though is you can get really proficient with these tools, so that you can, whether it's our product or other products, you can help other people in the industry if you're trying to break into the fund, to do much better job. For example, like with screening, right? Like you can build an AI that can screen for certain factors, or you can build an AI. Like for example, we built an AI in Desal Hub that helps people identify which are the right type of LPs that make the most sense for their fund given their thesis. And then it actually, you're able to use our Chrome plugin to find them in LinkedIn and add them to the CRM, right? So that's something that, for example, someone that's trying to break in to venture capital can do the work for a manager and provide an enormous amount of value using these sort of AI tools, right? So, generally pretty bullish about it. How to break into VC in the MENA region? Is there any remote virtual approach in the target is a if the target is the U.S. market? Well, there's a lot of funds launching in the MENA region right now. I think we've launched a number of them just in the last quarter. So try to find funds like that need help. Um, I mean, if the strategy is to break in funds in the MENA region that are targeting the U.S. market themselves, then you maybe want to be in the US yourself and be able to kind of unlock that network, like I discussed in the US for those funds. And then you can try to provide a lot of value, right? Whether it's through events and things like that, and really provide value. Um, like I said, if you can help a manager with reduce a lot of their work that they're doing, particularly when it comes to like fundraising and things like this, then you're naturally going to provide a lot of value. VC Lab cohort 17, is it virtual? It's virtual, and yeah, it's free. Um, so that cover that. Does the program help identify the level of role you need to be when you're trying to break into VC? Yeah, I mean, we definitely do that, but at the reality is that these are tiny funds if you're going to break into emerging managers. Like you're going to join a team with like 3 people. And that's great. That's great, right? Because that's how you sort of grow and provide an enormous amount of value. You're not joining like Lightspeed where they have like hundreds of people and you're kind of like, a cog in the machine, right? Um, and so, yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. We're going to talk about all the various roles about how these firms scale and do all those different things. But as a general rule, like, you're just going to be either like a venture partner or an associate. It's not that hard, right? And so that's how things get started. Is the VC Institute course full time? No, it's not. You can continue the current job in parallel for sure. But I do want to make it clear that a lot of folks that are doing other stuff, uh, remember, if you remember my kind of like last slide to about over deliver, a lot of people don't end up over delivering, and so you kind of also want to create these conditions where you over deliver and become super, you know, super successful, you know. So just kind of some thoughts on that. All right. Let's do two more questions and then we'll go to networking. Um, Is it better to focus on industry-specific VC funds, or industry agnostic fund? Which fund direction gives you a better chance to land a role? Most emerging managers are pretty focused. It's very rare that you're going to have a super general, like generalist approach, right? It might not be like the type of companies, but it might be a certain type of founder archetype, or they may be sourcing from a type of an accelerator. But almost all emerging managers have some sort of an edge. And so, therefore, by definition, they have some sort of focus. So, my guess is that most of the opportunities you're going to have are going to be like they're going to have some sort of focus. Might not be industry focus, it might be founder archetype focus, it might be like regional focus or whatever the case may be. But you kind of want to be in a focus, and that actually makes it a little bit easier for you because then you can actually align your skill sets or your ability with the type of focus that fund has, so think of it like that. Where can we find VCs to help them? That's well, Venture Institute's one way to do that, and the reason we do Venture Institute the way we do is because we're able to create a pretty good sort of quality filter, because Venture Institute, we teach you all the stuff and we place you, and then we only place you in firms that we know are really good, ethical, and operating really well, so that you don't have sort of like that risk, that you're kind of running with like a firm that you're not going to learn from. So that's one place to sort of start. I would say though that many of these emerging managers are pretty prominent. That's part of their job, right? They're like in the network business. They're all about extending their network. So you can easily find them on LinkedIn and that kind of stuff. And that's another place to think about that. Best approach to focus on how to break into a VC to focus on healthcare. Yeah, I mean, I think adding, bringing in healthcare connections and network and opportunities within healthcare to that VC that's focused on that is the way you sort of handle that. Do you believe there's enough quality deal flow to support hundreds of new and emerging VC funds? Um, yeah, Jim. You, so there's not hundreds. Okay, there's gonna be 10,000 VC funds that are gonna be created over the next 5 to 10 years. It's at that level, and even that's like not enough. I think what happens, and you see some of this conversation on social media a lot, is that, look, VC has historically been uh, pretty regional, like Silicon Valley, and like me, Boston, Tel Aviv, like you can sort of like name some of these sort of hotspots and stuff where there's been a lot of venture activity. But as the sort of startup industrial complex has gone super global, what ends up happening is that there needs to be pre-seed and seed funds in those markets, and that's is within the United States, within Canada, within Mexico, like everywhere, like all over the all over like the world needs pre-seed funds. I mean, we launched a fund in Mongolia, right? Like you wouldn't think that makes sense because it's a small country, right? But it does, given that the startup activity, right? And so you know There needs to be professional venture capital at the earliest of stages, because angels are not generally going to be very professional about this or good. There's not going to be, there's not enough support for a lot of these founders and things like that. And quite frankly, the big VCs can't invest at that level because they're deploying much more capital. So what they're actually starting to do now is they're creating fund of funds, and they're investing in these sort of pre-seed funds. And so as the startup industrial complex continues to grow, which I think is proven that it's growing significantly, there will need to be even more VCs than we can kind of imagine. It's just that what's happening is that there's basically it's almost like an entire new asset class that's being created within VC, which is emerging managers, emerging LPs, and it's very early stage, like pre-seed and seed. Whereas the more traditional VC that you sort of are used to with the very large fund sizes and things like that are focusing on later and later stages. And it's just a different style of investing and a different return profile too, right? And so that's what's happening right now. But overall, super bullish about the future, and we're just kind of at the beginning of this. This is probably the most impactful way for people to sort of deploy capital, right? Because these startups are creating the future that we all kind of want to, live in, and they're solving most of these problems. Like most of the problems the world faces today are going to be solved by venture-backed startups, that are built by ambitious founders that want to make the world a better place, and that's happening everywhere. And even emerging markets are creating the conditions for that to happen at a faster scale. All right, everyone. I hope I got through enough questions for everybody here. I'm going to come off screen here, and what you'll see is a set of tables. Those tables have topics where you can sort of discuss stuff. It's kind of like, going to like an event in the real world, where you can take a seat at a table, introduce yourself, put your camera on, say hello, have a conversation with the folks there, and sort of get to meet each other. Because, like I said, venture capital is a network business. And so this is an opportunity for you to grow your network as well. And hopefully, this was really valuable. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. I'll see you on the other side. Bye, everyone.